Oh boy, let me tell you, I have always been absolutely, horrendously terrible with directions. Like, seriously, it's legendary. My mom warned me before I even set foot in the bustling city. Bai Mingzhi, she said, cradling my face in her hands like I was still a little kid, you are going to get lost. You always get lost. For the love of everything that's holy, just look at the damn signs. I promised her I would. Total lie. On my very first day as a nursing intern at Tianhe General Hospital, I made a mistake of cosmic proportions. I walked into the wrong room, and I'm not talking a slight mix-up here. I'm talking about a spectacularly monumental blunder. I was meant to be in room 308, delivering post-op care notes to Mr. Song, a recovering patient who just had a knee replacement. But instead, I flung open the door to room 803, clipboard clutched like a life preserver and my best professional smile plastered on my face, only to be utterly frozen by what I saw. This room? It was nothing like the regular wards I had been trudging through. It was a VIP suite, spacious, serene, and wafting a scent of something ridiculously expensive that I couldn't even name. A floor-to-ceiling window showcased the city like it was some kind of $1,000,000 postcard, with golden afternoon light streaming in like it was on a mission. And there, lounging in the hospital bed, book in hand and 4-drip in tow, was quite possibly the most stunning man I had ever laid my eyes on in my entire life. He didn't even look up at first. His gaze was glued to his book, those lashes casting delicate shadows on his cheekbones, and his dark hair tousled just enough to look effortlessly cool. He was wearing the standard hospital gown, but somehow, in some unfathomable way, he made it look like high fashion. And then he glanced up. Those eyes, dark and calm, locked onto me with a level of scrutiny that felt like he could dissect my soul. "You're not my doctor," he stated flatly. His voice was low, smooth, and as cool as a cucumber. Not rude per se, just precise. "And no," I stammered, I'm an intern. I think I've got the wrong room." He studied the clipboard in my hands, then shot a glance back at me. "Room 308 is 4 floors down. The elevator on the east wing only goes to even-numbered floors. You took the wrong one." I gawked at him. "How the hell do you know where I'm going?" "Because I can read upside down," he replied, nodding at my clipboard, "and because you look exactly like someone who's been lost in these halls for at least 15 minutes. My cheeks burned hotter than a damn furnace. He was right. I had been wandering for precisely 17 minutes, but there was no way I was admitting that. I bowed my head, mortified. "I'm so sorry for bothering you. I'll just, leave right away." I turned to bolt. And then, because the universe has a twisted sense of humor reserved just for me, my foot snagged on the door frame and I stumbled forward, grasping the door handle in a panic that sent my clipboard skidding across the floor, papers flying like confetti. There was a moment of silence. I crouched down, scrambling to gather the papers with shaky hands, avoiding his gaze like it was radioactive. "Are you injured?" he asked, his tone surprisingly gentle. That question threw me off enough that I dared to look up. His expression was mostly unchanged, but there was a glint in his eyes, not quite concern, more like cautious interest. "I'm fine," I blurted out. "Really? I'm going now." I somehow managed to escape the room without face-planting again. I leaned against the wall in the hallway, releasing a long, shaky breath. My heart was doing this ridiculous dance in my chest. I convinced myself it was just the shock of nearly eating floor. It had absolutely nothing to do with the way he watched me pick up those papers, steady and attentive like I was something worth his time. I was a master at lying to myself back then. I found room 308, delivered the notes to a cheerful old man named Mr. Song, who offered me a tangerine and called me Little Rabbit. And then, for the rest of my shift, I tried and failed spectacularly to stop thinking about room 803. That evening, Lin Qingru cornered me in the break room, eyeing me like I had two heads. "What's up with your face?" she demanded. "Nothing," I mumbled. "You look like you either fell head over heels in love or just stepped on a cat," she teased, plopping down across from me. "Which one is it?" I thought of those dark, reading upside-down eyes and that low, smooth voice that pointed out my blunders without making me feel like a total idiot. "I accidentally went into the wrong room," I confessed. She raised an eyebrow, waiting for more. "The patient was—" I hesitated. He knew I was lost before I even spoke. Qingrou's expression morphed into a slow, mischievous grin. "Oh no, Mingzhi. Already? It's nothing," I insisted. "I'm never going back to that floor." Of course, the very next morning, guess who found themselves on that floor again? Not on purpose, mind you. Or so I told myself. But somehow, I ended up taking the west elevator instead of the east, and somehow that elevator opened up on the 8th floor, and somehow my feet led me right back to room 803 with absolutely no excuse to be there. I almost turned around and bolted. But then the door swung open, and there stood Xin Yuanxi in his hospital gown and slippers, for pole in hand, looking like he was ready for a leisurely stroll, completely unfazed to see me lingering outside his door. "You again?" he said, his tone flat. I was just passing by," I stuttered. He glanced at the empty hallway behind me, then back at me. "This is a dead end," he pointed out. "There's nowhere to pass to." I opened my mouth, then promptly shut it. He stepped back, pulling the four-pole with him, and gestured toward the room. "Since you're already here," he said casually, "why not check if this drip bag needs changing?" It was the weirdest invitation I had ever received. But hey, I walked in anyway. In the whirlwind of my first week with Shin Yuanxi, I stumbled upon 3 absolutely mind-blowing revelations. First off, the guy drinks his tea like a purist. No sugar, no sweeteners, and heaven help anyone who dares to add a single granule. Seriously, who does that? Second, he's a total sleep ninja, catching a mere 4 hours of shut-eye each night and spending the rest of his time buried in books or tackling documents that his ever-efficient secretary, Wen Chuan, drops off like clockwork. And third, his silence isn't just quiet, it's a rich, deep silence that feels like it's bursting at the seams with untold stories. It's like stepping into a room that's perfectly furnished, not a single thing out of place, and just waiting for you to discover its secrets. Honestly, I never intended to keep coming back. I swear on my favorite coffee mug, the first visit was a total accident, the second one was utterly inexplicable, and by the third visit I had run out of every excuse in the book. I convinced myself that checking on him was some sort of professional duty. What a damn joke, since he wasn't even on my rotation. My supervisor hadn't caught on yet, but Chingru? Oh, she was all over it, throwing me these knowing smiles every time I strolled back from the 8th floor like I was carrying a secret treasure. The weirdest part? He never once kicked me out. In those first few days, he barely acknowledged my existence, giving me nothing more than a nod when I checked his for or adjusted the water glass on his bedside table. I'd sit in that chair by the window, supposedly filling out reports on my tablet, but honestly I was doing a whole lot of nothing because that afternoon light was downright magical, and the silence wrapped around me like a cozy blanket. Then on the 4th day he broke the ice. "You grew up outside the city," he stated, not even looking up from his book. I blinked. "How the hell did you know that?" "The way you gaze at the skyline," he said, still glued to his pages. "It's like it still catches you off guard." I turned to the window and there it was, the sprawling city below us, a dazzling array of glass and steel in that classic afternoon haze, with 1,000 windows reflecting the sunlight like a million tiny stars. He was right, of course. It still amazed me even after 8 long months. I came from a place where the horizon stretched low and wide, where you could see a storm brewing from 3 villages away. "Small town," I replied. "About 4 hours south. You can practically see the mountains from the main road." He was silent for a moment, then said, "I've never seen mountains that weren't from a plane window." The way he said it was devoid of nostalgia, it was just a plain fact. But there was something about it that twisted my heart, like I was watching a door that was almost ajar, just begging to be pushed open. "That's kinda sad," I blurted out before I could stop myself. He finally met my gaze, his expression a total enigma. "Is it?" "Mountains are worth seeing up close," I insisted. "Standing at the base of one, you feel like the universe just expanded right in front of you." He studied me with those dark, intense eyes, and for a heartbeat, it felt like time stopped. Then he returned to his book, but I could have sworn the corner of his mouth twitched like it was fighting the urge to smile. I looked away, my heart racing, and focused intensely on my tablet. On the 5th day everything changed. When Chuan breezed in, briefcase in hand and folders stacked like a mini skyscraper, and as I passed him in the hallway, he bowed with all the grace of a royal butler and introduced himself as Shin Yuanxi's personal secretary, Chief Executive Officer of Xinyuan Group, no less. I stood frozen in the hallway after when Chuan vanished into the room. Xinyuan Group. That name echoed like a thunderclap in my mind. Everyone knew it. It was one of the titanic private investment firms in the country, built from the ground up by a self-made mogul who graced the covers of business magazines more often than I changed my socks. This was the kind of company that made headlines for sneezing. And here I was, sitting in his hospital room, casually chatting about mountains. When I stepped inside that day, I felt like a total klutz. My hands were twitchy, adjusting things that didn't need adjusting, as if I were a robot malfunctioning. He caught on immediately. "You looked me up," he said, not missing a beat. When Chuan told me, I admitted, feeling like I'd just been caught with my hand in the cookie jar. "And now you're treating me differently." "I'm not." "By Mingzhi." It was the first time he'd ever used my name. My heart did a little flip. I went completely still. "Sit down," he commanded. But there was this almost desperate edge to it, like he was pleading with me not to morph into everyone else who saw him as just a CEO. I plopped down, my tablet resting awkwardly in my lap, staring out the window. "Do you miss the mountains?" he asked, as if we were simply picking up a conversation that had never been interrupted. All the tension in my chest melted away. Every single damn day, I confessed. He nodded, just a tiny movement as if that answer made perfect sense to him. We sat in a comfortable silence until visiting hours ran out. On the 6th day, I walked in to find him standing at the window like a damn statue, hands clasped behind his back, gazing out at the cityscape. He had graduated to walking without the four-pole that morning according to the chart, and he looked a million times better, steadier, stronger. You'd think that would fill me with relief, right? It did. But underneath that relief lurked something smaller, something inconvenient, quietly refusing to be ignored. He was getting better. Which meant he'd be leaving soon. You came, he said, still not turning around. I always come, I shot back, wishing I'd chosen my words more carefully. He turned to face me. In that golden window light he looked less like a patient and more like, well, himself, whoever that was outside these four walls. He seemed sharper, more composed. They're discharging me in 2 days, he said. I nodded, already knowing. I'd seen it in the system that morning and spent the next 20 minutes in the supply closet pretending to organize gauze. That's good, I said. You've recovered well. He watched me closely as I spoke, and something flickered across his face, quick, layered, gone before I could pinpoint it. Yes, he said. I suppose it is. That evening, Chingru found me in the break room again, same chair, same lukewarm tea. He's leaving in 2 days, I blurted out before she could even ask. She sat across from me, the weight of her silence heavy in the air. Do you want to do something about that? She finally asked, her voice cutting through the tension. I thought about those dark eyes that seemed to see right through me. About a voice that had said my name like it was the most precious thing in the world. About how silence felt different now, fuller, richer, more profound. I don't know how, I admitted, feeling like I was staring into a chasm. She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers, her touch warm and grounding. Yes, you do, she said gently. You just walked into his room uninvited and stayed for a week. I think you know exactly how. I nearly skipped out on that last day, I swear. I stood outside room 803 for what felt like an eternity, 4 whole minutes. Yeah, I counted every agonizing tick of the second hand on that hallway clock for times around. I had 0 things with me. Not a chart, not a clipboard, not a single professional excuse to my name. Just me, decked out in my intern getup, heart racing like it was auditioning for the Olympics. What the hell was I going to say? I've known you for a mere 7 days, and somehow you've wormed your way into being the absolute highlight of my mornings? Sitting in silence with you feels like I've known you for a lifetime, way more than most conversations I've had in my entire damn life. So I knocked. Come in, he said, his voice echoing like a siren call. The dude was practically packed up and ready to bounce. His briefcase was chilling by the chair, all zipped up tight. The bedside table looked stripped bare, making the room feel like a sterile hotel instead of a place where someone had actually lived, impersonal and just waiting for the next poor soul. But there he was, still lingering by the window one last time, dressed like a regular human being now, a dark coat and a gray sweater that made him look like a damn movie star. He was so utterly himself, so out of place in this sterile environment, that I felt the distance between us both collapse and expand at the same time, like some weird cosmic phenomenon. You came, he said, echoing the same words as before. But this time, his voice had a different vibe, quieter, almost like he was holding back a tidal wave of emotions. I wanted to say goodbye, I said, trying to keep it together. Properly. He turned from the window, looking at me with that direct, careful gaze of his, not unkind but definitely not sugarcoating anything. And after the goodbye? He asked, and damn, that question hit the room like a meteor crashing into a still pond. What do you mean? I shot back, even though my heart had already picked up on what he was hinting at. After you say goodbye, he continued, what happens then? You go back to your rotation. I go back to the company. We don't see each other again. He said it all cool and collected, just like he did with everything else. But his eyes? Oh man, they were doing this whole dance of vulnerability, like he was holding his breath, waiting for me to react to what he just laid down. In that moment, it hit me like a freight train. He was asking a question without actually asking it. For someone like him, this was probably as close to a declaration as he could muster. My mouth felt like the Sahara. I don't want that, I said, the words slipping out smaller than I'd hoped. I don't want it to be a goodbye that just ends. The room fell into a heavy silence. You realize, he said slowly, that I am a difficult person. I know, I replied, trying to sound braver than I felt. I don't explain myself often. I work ridiculous hours. I've been told I'm impossible to have a conversation with. I've had a week's worth of conversations with you, I countered. I didn't find them impossible. Something flickered in his expression, A tiny shift, just a hint of softness around the eyes, like the tiniest crack in his stoic facade. But I caught it. I had spent 7 days learning to read the little things he let slip. "You walked into the wrong room," he said, his voice laced with that classic dry humor. "Yeah," I admitted. "And then you just kept coming back." "Absolutely. Without any reason?" "I had a reason," I said softly. "I just couldn't spit it out yet." He froze and then he crossed the room, slow and steady, like a man who'd made up his mind and wasn't going to back down. He stopped right in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head up to meet his gaze. Up close, his eyes were even darker, and for the first time, I noticed a hint of uncertainty swirling in them that made my heart do a little flip. "I don't know how to do this," he said quietly, almost like a confession. "Whatever this is." "Neither do I said, laying it all out there. "But I'd like to figure it out. If you want to." He reached up, slowly, deliberately, giving me every chance to back away, and tucked a stray hair behind my ear. His fingers barely brushed my temple before pulling away, like he was testing the waters of something incredibly fragile. My entire nervous system erupted like a fireworks show. "Wen Chuan will have opinions," he said, as if that was a real-world concern to tackle. "Qingru will have even more," I shot back. The corner of his mouth twitched, and this time I was certain it was a smile, small, genuine, and so rare that it felt like a precious gift rather than just a simple expression. "Then they can have their opinions," he said. "Together." Outside the room, I heard Wen Chuan's footsteps approaching and the distant rumble of a discharge cart being wheeled down the hall. The real world was about to crash back in schedules, meetings, and the mundane machinery of our separate lives. But for that one fleeting moment, it was just us, this room, that window, and the man in front of me who had chosen, in his own careful way, to let me stay. I smiled up at him and he held my gaze with those steady, dark eyes, not looking away. It was the first time in my life that I felt blissfully lost. Whoa, nobody ever clued me in that falling head over heels for someone in a hospital is like a whole different universe compared to the real world. I mean, seriously. Inside those sterile, white-walled confines, Shen Yuanxi was like a caged lion, stuck in a room, peering out of a window, and only allowed a handful of hours each day to be a human. Super simple, right? Easy peasy to understand. But out here? Holy hell. He was a titan. A colossal force with a company that never hit pause, a schedule that kicked off before the crack of dawn, and a phone buzzing like it had a life of its own. This guy was splashed all over magazines, making decisions that could shift the universe in ways I couldn't even begin to wrap my head around. And yet, there he was, texting me at 11:30 at night to check if I'd eaten dinner. What the hell? That's the part that kept knocking me off my feet. The outrageous difference between the world's perception of him, Shen Yuanxi, the cool, untouchable mogul, and the guy who sent me a pic of the ugliest ceramic frog imaginable from some antique market, captioned, "Thought of you." Don't ask why. I mean, come on. I slapped that photo as my phone wallpaper, and you wouldn't believe the reaction. Qingru nearly screamed her lungs out when she saw it, and Wen Chuan? Oh, when I spilled the beans later, he shut his eyes like he'd just received the best news ever. But let's be real here, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I want to keep it 100% real with you. There were weeks where his schedule devoured him like a ravenous beast, and I'd go 3 whole days without so much as a peep, except for a brief message that felt like a whisper in a hurricane. There were nights I'd show up at his apartment. He casually tossed me a spare key on our third date like it was just a pen, only to find him still glued to his desk at 9 p.m., tie loosened, completely lost in the abyss of paperwork, probably forgetting there was a whole world outside that damn document. On those nights, I'd sneak into his kitchen and whip up tea just the way he liked it, no sugar, steeped for precisely 4 minutes, and leave it beside him without a single word. Sometimes, he'd reach over, just a light touch on the back of my hand as I set it down, still staring at his work like it was the most fascinating thing in the universe. Just a touch. Just enough to say, "I know you're here. I'm glad you're here." And you know what? That was enough. More than enough. It was like he was whispering the things he couldn't yet say out loud. He was figuring it out too, I could see it, the meticulous way he pieced me together like he was constructing something delicate that he didn't want to mess up. He remembered the tiniest details I'd mentioned once in passing, like that time he showed up at the hospital during my break with 2 cups of tea from that little place 3 blocks away that I had casually dropped a hint about. He stood there in his coat outside the staff entrance, holding those paper cups like it was the most ordinary thing ever, and I laughed so hard I nearly collapsed against the wall. "You didn't have to trek all the way here," I told him. "I was nearby," he shrugged, all nonchalant. Later, when Chuan spilled the beans that he had actually shuffled 2 afternoon meetings just to be close by. I swear, I cried a little when I found that out. Not in front of him, of course, but still. The toughest moment hit about 2 months in, on a night that started with the silliest argument over nothing. I was drained, he was distracted, and we tossed around words that were really about something much deeper. I stormed out of his apartment and marched 3 blocks in the biting cold when my phone buzzed. It was him. Just 4 words, "Come back. I'm sorry." Then a minute later, "I don't know how to fight well. I'm learning." Then, "Please come back." I stood there on the sidewalk, freezing my ass off, reading those messages 3 times like they were some kind of secret code. My eyes were doing that embarrassing thing again. A woman walking her dog shot me a worried glance and I waved her off like, "I'm fine," and turned right around to go back. He was waiting at his door, coat on, like he was ready to chase after me. We stood there in the doorway, silence wrapping around us like a thick blanket. "I'm not good at this," he finally admitted, his voice softer than usual. "At any of this. You know that." "I know," I replied. "I'm not either." "Then we're going to be really bad at this together for a while," he said, and it wasn't quite a question, more like a realization. "Probably," I agreed, trying not to laugh. Something shifted in him, that subtle release I had learned to recognize, the one that meant he had been carrying a weight and just let it go. He stepped back from the door and I walked in. We were clumsy at it together for a while. And then, magically, we started to get better. Then one evening, 6 months after that awkward intern blundered into the wrong hospital room, I found myself lounging on his couch with my legs draped across his lap, textbook in hand, while he was buried in some work-related reading, and the apartment was enveloped in a silence that had become my absolute favorite sound in the universe. He glanced up from his reading and said, "I want to see the mountains." I set my textbook down and he was looking at me with those intense, steady eyes, direct and determined, carrying the weight of something monumental. "Your mountains," he clarified. "The ones you can see from the main road." My chest swelled with something too big for words. "Okay," I said softly. "We can go." "Next month," he declared. "I'll clear the schedule." "You don't have to clear a whole month." "A week," he insisted, and I swear, the look on his face was the closest to sheepish I had ever seen him. "One Chuan will manage." I looked at him, this complex, careful, quietly devoted man who had once confessed he didn't know how to navigate any of this, and I thought about that wrong elevator, that wrong floor, and the door I almost didn't open. "You're going to love them," I told him. "The mountains. They make everything feel just right." He reached over and covered my hand with his thumb tracing a gentle arc across my knuckles, the same gesture he had been repeating for months. Small, quiet, and entirely his. "I think," he said very softly, "I already know that feeling." Outside, the city sparkled like a million diamonds. Tomorrow would bring schedules, rotations, and all the usual chaos of our separate yet intertwined lives. But right now, it was just the warm weight of his hand over mine, the silence that felt like home, and the solid, unwavering knowledge, as steady and certain as a mountain, that I had gotten wonderfully, incredibly lost in exactly the right direction.